The sun is setting, casting long shadows over the cracked asphalt as the heavy rumble of motorcycles fills the air. The wind carries the familiar scent of diesel and leather, the kind of smell that's thick, urgent, and dangerous. A small boy, no older than 7, stands still, clutching the leash of a golden retriever guide dog by his side. His eyes are wide, a little nervous but resolute. His fingers twitch against the cool metal of the dog's harness. The boy doesn't see the bikers at first. The noise of the motorcycles has drowned out the sound of their rumbling engines. But the dog hears them. Its ears perk up, its body stiffens. The boy's pulse quickens as he feels the tension in the air shift, the kind of tension you can feel before a storm. Without a word, the dog starts to bark, low, deep, and warning. The boy's hand tightens on the leash as his heart races. But then, something unexpected happens. A biker, the leader of the pack, steps forward with a grin on his face. "What's this?" he sneers, looking down at the boy and his dog like they are nothing more than an amusing distraction. He reaches out with one hand, brushing the boy's shoulder, moving in toward the golden retriever. The dog growls, a deep, warning sound that seems to shake the air. The boy's breath catches. He pulls back. "No," he whispers urgently. "Leave him alone." The bikers laugh, their voices like gravel being crushed underfoot. They're toying with the idea of taking the dog, just for fun. The boy can feel the cold air prickling against his skin, the heat rising in his chest. His small form shakes, but it's not from fear. It's from the surge of courage filling him, a determination that makes his knees weak. His father has taught him not to back down, to never let anyone push him around. But his father is miles away, unreachable, at this moment. And the bikers, they don't know who they're dealing with. The boy steps forward, his voice stronger now. Though it trembles, "You can't take him." But the bikers only laugh harder. They think it's a joke. What they don't know is that this little boy is not just anyone. He has the world's best guide dog by his side, and his father is no ordinary man. His father is a federal judge, and as the bikers step closer, unaware of the storm they've just stirred, the dog stands guard. And somewhere, far away, a judge is about to make a decision that will forever change the course of their lives. Your support keeps us going. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the city's cracked streets, but the air was thick with unease. The boy's footsteps were light, though heavy with purpose. Milo, his guide dog, trotted beside him, every step in perfect sync with his own. The golden retriever's fur glowed in the late afternoon light, and there was something almost magical about the way the boy's hand gripped the leather harness, as if the dog could lead him to places the boy could never go alone. The city had always been their home, familiar, bustling, and loud. But today, as they crossed the street, there was something different in the air. The sound of motorcycles revving grew louder, the vibrations of the engines reverberating through the pavement and into the boy's bones. Milo's ears pricked up at the sound, his tail flicking nervously. The boy could feel the tension building in the air. His steps faltered, and for the first time, the boy realized how much he depended on his dog's instincts, how much Milo was more than a guide to him. He was his protector. Milo's growl was low, a sound that vibrated through the boy's fingertips as they brushed against the dog's harness. It wasn't the playful bark of a dog excited for a game. This was different, urgent, primal, protective. The boy stopped, his heart suddenly racing, a cold shiver running down his spine. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. But it wasn't fear. It was something else, something like the deep, rooted certainty that the world around him was about to shift in ways he didn't understand. And then they appeared. The bikers. A group of them, their leather jackets black against the fading daylight, their roaring engines growing louder by the second. They slowed as they approached, their eyes scanning the street with an almost predatory hunger. They didn't seem to care that they were disturbing the peaceful evening. For a moment, it felt like the world stood still. The boy's grip on Milo's leash tightened, the fabric of the leash feeling colder now, the tension between them palpable. "Hey, what's this?" one of the bikers said, his voice thick with mockery as he took in the sight of the boy and his guide dog. His eyes glinted with amusement, his smile stretching wide as he glanced down at the boy, a little blind kid with his dog. "What, is he your service dog or something?" The boy didn't respond. He couldn't. His heart was pounding in his chest, louder than the roar of the bikes. Milo's growl grew deeper, more insistent. The boy felt the pull of fear, like a weight pressing down on his chest, but at the same time, he felt something else. A quiet defiance, a desire to protect the one thing in his life that had always been there for him. Milo wasn't just a dog, he was his partner, his friend, his lifeline. The biker stepped closer, ignoring Milo's warning. "I think it's time for a little fun." He reached out, his hand brushing against the dog's fur, like he was petting him, but there was no kindness in his touch. It was a calculated move, a way to assert dominance, to show the boy that he was nothing. But Milo wasn't going to let that happen. The dog snapped, his teeth flashing, a warning that had the biker retreating, his face twisting in surprise. But the bikers only laughed, thinking it was all some kind of joke. The boy, his heart in his throat, stepped forward, instinctively pulling the leash in his hands. "No," he whispered, his voice small but firm. "Leave him alone." The bikers paused, the laughter fading. They hadn't expected this. A boy so small, so vulnerable, standing up to them. The leader of the pack, the one who had first approached, looked at the boy with a smirk. "Or what?" he sneered, clearly amused by the boy's courage. The boy opened his mouth to speak again, but the words caught in his throat. His body trembled, the fear threatening to overtake him. But he didn't let it. He couldn't let it. "Or I'll make you stop," he said, his voice shaking but determined. The bikers laughed again. But there was something different this time, a sense of hesitation, of doubt. They didn't know who this boy was, or what he was capable of. And just for a moment, the weight of that uncertainty hung in the air between them. But the boy's bravery faltered when he realized that his voice, his words, couldn't protect him. His father was miles away, unreachable, and in that moment, he felt completely alone. The bikers were still there, their laughter still ringing in his ears, and all he could do was hold onto Milo's leash, hoping the dog would protect them both. And then, just when it felt like everything would crumble, the phone in his pocket buzzed, an unexpected lifeline. The boy fumbled for it, his hands shaking, his heart racing in his chest. He didn't know who was calling, but he didn't care. He needed help, and he needed it now. "Dad," the boy whispered into the phone, his voice barely audible over the noise of the motorcycles. But the bikers didn't know who was on the other end of the line. They didn't know that the boy's father was a federal judge, a man whose voice alone could stop them in their tracks. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the boy felt hope stir inside him. The boy held the phone to his ear, his fingers numb from gripping it so tightly. The laughter of the bikers seemed to fade, though he could still feel their eyes on him, like a weight pressing down on his chest. He could hear the sound of his father's voice on the other end, calm and steady, but the boy's words were choking him. "Dade, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. There are bikers. They want to take Milo. They're going to hurt him." His father's voice softened, but it didn't carry the urgency the boy had hoped for. "I'm on my way, son. Hold tight." The boy's heart dropped. Hold tight? He wasn't sure he could. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, and the bikers, sensing his vulnerability, grew bolder. They started circling, inching closer to him and Milo, their intentions no longer a mystery. The boy could feel the grip of fear tightening in his chest, suffocating him, but Milo remained by his side, unshaken, unwavering. But the boy knew that as strong as Milo was, he wasn't enough to face this alone. He had always trusted his father to be there, to fix things, to protect him. But now, his father wasn't here. The boy's trust had been breached, not just by the bikers, but by the absence of the one person he had always relied on. His father's reassurance felt hollow, and the boy was left to wonder if his father would make it in time. "I'll be there soon," his father's voice said again, more insistent now. "Don't let them take Milo." But the boy wasn't sure he could hold on much longer. The wind picked up, whistling through the trees, cutting through the tense silence that had descended upon the street. The boy's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the ticking clock, the unbearable weight of the situation. His fingers trembled on the phone, still held to his ear, and his grip on Milo's leash tightened until his knuckles ached. But despite the panic rising inside him, despite the cold sweat creeping down his back, the boy held his ground. Milo stood resolutely at his side, watching the bikers with unwavering eyes. The leader of the group, the one who had approached them first, took another step forward, the sneer still present on his face. He seemed to revel in the power he had, the intimidation he had over this boy and his dog. The boy's stomach twisted with dread as the biker reached out again, this time with a little more force, trying to pull Milo's harness away from him. But just as his fingers brushed against the dog's fur, the world seemed to freeze. The phone in the boy's hand buzzed again. It wasn't just a vibration, it was a jolt, sharp and sudden, like the awakening of a dormant force. The boy's breath caught, and a deep sense of dread gripped him. But then came the voice on the other end, the voice that carried with it the weight of authority. "Leave my son alone." The biker froze, his hand still hovering over Milo's harness, but now he was no longer the predator. His eyes widened, and the cocky smirk faded, replaced with uncertainty. The boy's father didn't shout. He didn't need to. His words were measured calm, yet they carried an undeniable weight. The boy could feel the power in his father's voice, even through the phone. This was not just any father. This was a man whose presence demanded respect, whose reputation was built on years of hard work, integrity, and authority. "You heard me," the boy's father continued. "I suggest you step away, or I'll have you arrested for harassment. And I promise it won't be easy for you to get out of this." The bikers exchanged glances, their bravado wavering. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and now they were starting to realize their mistake. The boy's father had the kind of influence that could change everything in an instant. The kind that would force them to face consequences they hadn't imagined. The leader of the group cursed under his breath, looking back at the boy, then down at Milo. The air hung thick with tension, but the bikers, now uncertain, began to retreat, stepping back slowly, reluctantly. The boy's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline still coursing through him. He could hear the engines rev as the bikers began to pull away, their bikes rumbling into the distance. Milo, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, let out a soft, satisfied bark, his tail wagging as he looked up at the boy. The boy exhaled sharply, his chest tight with relief. But there was also something else, something he couldn't quite name. It was the lingering taste of fear, of vulnerability, mixed with the bitter realization that the world wasn't always as safe as he had once believed. The boy lowered the phone from his ear, his legs feeling unsteady beneath him. He glanced at Milo, who stood by his side, as loyal and steadfast as ever. The dog's presence grounded him, but the fear remained, a quiet whisper in the back of his mind, reminding him that even the strongest protectors couldn't always keep the darkness at bay. "Dead." The boy's voice was small, but his father's reply came quickly, like a balm to his wounded spirit. "I'm proud of you, son. I'll be there soon. You're safe now." But even as he heard the words, something inside him still trembled. He had been saved, yes, but the feeling of helplessness lingered, a scar in his chest that he couldn't quite shake. The bikers were gone, their engines fading into the distance, but the aftermath of their visit was far from over. The boy stood still, his eyes locked on the empty street, feeling the weight of the silence that had descended in the wake of their departure. He felt a strange mix of relief and confusion, like he had just woken from a nightmare that was far too real. His fingers were still tight around Milo's leash, as if the world might suddenly shift again and he would have to defend himself once more. Milo, sensing the boy's tension, nuzzled against his leg, offering comfort in the only way he knew how. The dog's warmth was a small solace, but it didn't erase the heaviness in the boy's chest. His father's voice had reassured him, had given him the safety he had longed for, but it hadn't taken away the fear that had been planted so deep within him. He had been afraid, he had been vulnerable, and that terrified him. When his father arrived moments later, it was clear that he was shaken by what had happened. The boy watched as his father stepped off the car, his face a mixture of concern and relief. He hurried toward the boy, enveloping him in an embrace that felt both comforting and suffocating. The boy stiffened at first, his chest tight with a mix of emotions, but he slowly relaxed, allowing himself to lean into his father's presence. "Are you okay?" his father asked, his voice softer now, though still carrying the weight of authority. His hand rested on the boy's head, a gesture that would have been comforting had it not been so foreign in the wake of the event. The boy swallowed hard, the lump in his throat refusing to go away. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice wavered, betraying him. The boy's father stepped back, his eyes scanning the scene, his gaze sharp and calculating, like a judge evaluating evidence in a courtroom. "We're going to take care of this," he said firmly, his eyes meeting the boy's with a sense of resolve. "No one gets to hurt you or Milo ever again." The boy nodded, but there was still a part of him that wasn't sure. His father's promise, though comforting, didn't remove the sting of what had happened. He wasn't just scared for himself. He was scared for the world around him. How many people, like the bikers, would see him as just a target, just an easy mark? His father, sensing the boy's lingering unease, knelt down to meet his eyes. "You've got nothing to prove, son. You did what you needed to do. You stood up for yourself. And you've got me and Milo right here." The boy nodded again, but it didn't fully erase the fear in his heart. Milo was at his side, unwavering, but there was still a quiet, persistent voice telling him that the world outside wasn't always as safe as he wished it could be. The boy glanced up at his father, who was still watching him carefully, his expression soft but serious. "I'm scared, Dad," the boy admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. And his father, the man who had always seemed like an unshakable fortress, gave him a look that softened his edges. "I know you are, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean you can't stand tall. You've already done it once, and I'll always be here to back you up." The boy's chest tightened as his father's words sank in. He wanted to believe them. He wanted to feel like everything would be okay, like the fear would go away. But the truth was, he was scared, and that was something he was still learning to live with. The days that followed were a blur of quiet moments and quiet realizations. The fear that had gripped the boy's chest, the uncertainty that had flooded his mind, didn't vanish when the bikers were gone. It lingered, like the aftertaste of a bitter pill, reminding him that danger could strike at any moment. But something else grew alongside it. A quiet, stubborn strength. Each morning as the sun cast its first light across the room, the boy would wake to find Milo lying at his side, as if the dog had been there the whole night, standing guard over him even in sleep. The boy's fingers would automatically reach for the dog's warm fur, as if it were the only anchor he could trust in a world that seemed just a little more dangerous than it had been the day before. The scent of Milo's coat, warm and earthy, was a comfort, a reassurance that, despite everything, the boy was not alone. But the boy had changed. His father had been right. He had stood up for himself, for Milo. He had faced fear, and though it had shaken him to his core, he had done it. That was something he hadn't fully realized until now. One morning, when the sun had just begun to rise and the world outside was still quiet, the boy found himself standing by the window, watching the city wake up. His hand was gently resting on Milo's head, the dog's tail wagging slightly in response, though they both knew the world outside wasn't the same as it had been before. The boy could still feel the echo of the bikers' laughter in his ears, their mocking voices like a distant drumbeat in his mind. But it no longer held the same weight. He had faced it, and he had survived. The boy's father was in the kitchen, making breakfast, his back to the boy as he hummed a quiet tune. The boy's thoughts drifted to his father's earlier words, the ones he had said after the bikers had gone. "You've got nothing to prove, son." For the first time, the boy understood what his father meant. It wasn't about standing up against every threat that came his way, or proving he could be brave in every moment. It was about knowing, deep down, that there was strength inside him that he could tap into when it mattered most. He didn't have to be fearless. He just had to be strong enough to keep going, even when the fear felt overwhelming. Milo's nose nudged the boy's hand, bringing him back to the present. The boy smiled softly, a small, contented smile that reached his eyes, the kind of smile that came when you realized the storm inside you had finally passed. He turned toward the kitchen, where his father was setting a plate of pancakes on the table. The smell of maple syrup filled the air, and the boy couldn't help but feel a warmth spread through him, a sense of comfort that had been missing for so long. His father looked up as the boy approached, his smile warm but tinged with the same protective concern that had been there since the first moment he'd seen the bikers approach. But now, there was something different in his eyes, something softer. "You doing okay?" his father asked, his voice gentle. The boy hesitated for a moment, as if searching for the right words, and then finally he nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay." His voice was steady now, no longer cracking with fear or doubt. His father's eyes softened, and he reached out to ruffle the boy's hair, the gesture a little awkward but filled with love. "I'm proud of you, you know," he said quietly, his tone filled with a quiet pride that made the boy's chest swell. "I know, Dad," the boy replied, his voice full of the quiet realization that had been growing inside him. "I'm proud of me too." And it was in that moment, as the two of them stood in the kitchen together, the soft light filtering through the windows and the smell of breakfast wrapping around them, that the boy understood the true meaning of his father's words. It wasn't just about the big moments, the ones where you had to be brave and strong. It was about the quiet moments too, the ones where you realized you had already grown, even if you didn't feel like it. The boy had learned to trust in himself, and Milo, ever the faithful companion, had helped him find that strength. They didn't need anyone else to protect them anymore. They had each other. And so, as the boy sat down at the table with his father, the fear from the past few days felt like a distant memory, something that had been necessary to face in order to grow. It wasn't gone, but it was no longer in control. The boy took a deep breath, the air feeling lighter now, as if the world around him had suddenly opened up in a way he had never noticed before. His father's smile was full of warmth, and Milo's tail wagged happily beneath the table. Everything felt right in this moment. The boy felt safe, not because of anything his father had done, but because he had found a way to stand tall on his own. And that, more than anything, was the truest kind of growth. The warmth of the morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a soft glow over the boy's face as he sat at the table, his eyes meeting his father's across the room. The pancakes sat untouched for a moment, the syrup slowly glistening on the plate. But for the first time in days, the boy felt the quiet power of peace settle around him. His father's gaze was full of pride, but there was something else there too, something more subtle. An unspoken understanding that the boy had crossed a threshold, that he had grown in a way that was both painful and necessary. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, the kind of silence that fills the space with everything that has been said without words. The boy reached for his fork, breaking it, his movements slow but purposeful. He didn't feel rushed anymore. Not by the bikers, not by the fear, and not even by his father's unspoken expectation. He felt time stretch out, like the room had expanded just a little bit to give him room to breathe. His father didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. There were no more lectures or reassurances. They both knew that the boy had fought for something more than just his dog, more than just his safety. He had fought for his place in the world. A world that wasn't always kind, but one that could be navigated with strength and resilience. The kind of resilience that the boy had never known he had, until that moment with the bikers. The boy's father had always been a man of few words, a man whose silence had often made the boy feel small in comparison. But now, sitting across from him, the boy felt something else. He felt that his father understood him, truly understood the quiet battle that had been waged inside him. It wasn't just the bikers who had been a threat. It was the overwhelming weight of his own vulnerability, his own fear that had nearly drowned him. The bikers had merely been the catalyst. His real enemy had been inside him all along. But now, As the warmth of the morning sun touched his skin, he knew that he had faced it. The boy's father broke the silence, his voice low and steady. "You've always been stronger than you realize, you know that." The boy looked up, startled, and his father's eyes met his, a silent challenge in those words. It wasn't a compliment, it was a statement of fact. The boy had always known his father as a man who believed in action over words, who showed love through responsibility and discipline rather than affection. But today, his father wasn't just looking at him like the boy who had to learn to be strong. He was looking at him like a man who had already found that strength. "I didn't know I had it in me," the boy admitted, his voice soft but steady. He hadn't expected the words to come out, but they did, and they felt like a release, like a weight lifting off his chest. His father smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need to be big to be full of warmth. "You had it in you all along. You just needed the right moment to realize it." The boy nodded, his eyes drifting down to Milo, who was lying at his feet, resting his head on the floor contentedly. Milo, the ever-present companion. The steady heartbeat beneath the boy's hand. The protector who had been his anchor through it all. The dog's eyes met his, warm and knowing, as if Milo understood the depth of the boy's journey more than anyone else could. For the first time, the boy understood what it meant to be truly seen, not just by his father, but by himself. He had always relied on others to protect him, to tell him what was right and wrong, to guide him when the world felt too heavy. But now, for the first time, he understood that the strength he had been searching for wasn't just about standing tall in front of others. It was about standing tall within himself. It was about trusting his own instincts, his own courage, even when everything inside him screamed for safety. As the morning sun continued to climb higher, the boy sat there, feeling something in him shift. The world outside had not changed. It still held its dangers, its uncertainties, and its unfairness. But he had changed, and in that change was a quiet kind of power. Not the power to control everything around him, but the power to face whatever came with the knowledge that he could stand his ground. The boy no longer felt the weight of fear pressing down on him. Instead, he felt the weight of his own growth, heavy in the most beautiful way. His father leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting toward the window, as if taking in the same sunlight the boy had been staring at earlier. The world, once intimidating and threatening, suddenly felt a little more manageable. The boy's father turned back toward him, his expression softer now, the lines of worry on his face replaced with something like acceptance. "You're ready," his father said quietly, the words not just for the moment, but for the future that lay ahead. "You're ready to take on whatever life throws at you. And when you need help, when you need someone to stand by you, I'll be here." The boy met his father's eyes and nodded. He didn't need to say anything more. His father's words were enough. They were more than enough. And just like that, in that quiet exchange, the boy knew that his life would never be the same. Not because he had suddenly found some grand, heroic strength, but because he had discovered something far more valuable, the quiet resilience to face the world as it was and to keep moving forward, no matter what. Milo's tail wagged beneath the table, a soft thump against the floor, as if to confirm that everything, in its own way, was going to be okay. The boy smiled at his father, his gaze steady, and for the first time in his life, he felt the full weight of what it meant to be proud of himself. To know that he had done something not for anyone else, but for him. And as the light from the window bathed the room in golden warmth, the boy, his father, and his dog sat together in the quiet aftermath of what had been and what would come next. And for the first time in a long time, the boy felt the peaceful comfort of knowing that he was, in every way that mattered, ready. The world outside, with all its dangers and challenges, was still waiting. But now, the boy knew he was no longer a passive passenger. He was part of the world, with the strength to shape his place in it, however he chose. And that knowledge, as simple and profound as it was, filled him with a quiet sense of hope that no biker, no fear, and no uncertainty could ever take away. The morning sunlight continued to pour in, gentle and steadfast, and the boy, with Milo at his side and his father across from him, felt ready to face whatever came next, not with fear, but with courage that had, at last, become his own. The following story is a work of fiction inspired by real-life themes of resilience, personal growth, and the bond between a child and their guide dog. While the narrative draws on real emotional struggles, the characters, events, and situations depicted are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. The story is intended for entertainment and emotional reflection only. The depiction of certain actions and consequences in the story does not reflect real-world events or legal outcomes and should not be construed as factual or representative of any specific individuals or organizations.